welcome to my super secret channel, Mind for Story. Today I want to talk about fragility in The Good Place. A quick reminder, I'm a story spoiler, so please don't watch my content if you have not watched The Good Place through all the way to the end.
I don't need the Chidi who once had a panic attack during rock, paper, scissors because there were, and I quote, just too many variables.
Now, I feel like the obvious case of fragility in this chapter is just Chidi anytime he has to try and make a decision. But I'm going to do my best to talk about other things I noticed besides just the obvious, which is Chidi melting down.
I'm really hot. Is this air conditioner even working?
Yes, it is. You're just having a literal meltdown.
As far as I can tell, this is sort of a moral-based extreme perfectionism. I'm trying to get a handle on if I think Chidi is fragile or if Chidi is concerned that the world is fragile and that paralyzes him. I think I could make an argument either way. The things he's concerned about, like the speech in particular, what is the possible potential fallout if the speech isn't perfect? Because I really don't think there would be one. He's not going to say anything like mean or humiliating about, his friend. So really, there's minimal impact the speech has on anyone other than Chidi. And of all the things that Chidi has halted these events leading up to the wedding, possibly the ethical practices of the jeweler might be the only one that, was fair of him to go ahead and just not do. And the other thing I'd like to bring up, the longer Chidi stays paralyzed from his perfectionism, his moral perfectionism, the more he's actually robbing everyone around him. He, not just of their time and the experiences that they don't have because everyone was waiting on him to make a choice. Those are the obvious things that he robs them of. But he's robbing them of, dialogue, because by the time he makes a decision, they just want him to make any decision. They don't even bother giving their own input by that point. And that means there's no discussion that involves other people's points of view. Nobody gets around to expressing disagreement because that would just prolong this whole process. Nobody else gets to be right if it contradicts him, because then it just is going, again, to create an even longer wait on something that everybody's already waited an excessive length of time for. And I really, that's what I think is the biggest problem here, is there's no perspective sharing, and perspective is really important because no one person can know everything. So getting perspectives from other people is always a wonderful option if you can have it. Or even if he just made a wrong choice, it breaks the, don't be the wrong person first seal, and then other people can make a choice because it's now okay if they also make the wrong choice. And I'm not talking about like doing something bad. I'm just talking about not choosing the perfect option. But basically, it's sort of stunting Chidi's growth and the growth of everyone around him, because he is preventing the opportunities for other people to have input, make choices, or be wrong or right, because everybody's just waiting on him.
No, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I love you.
And Eleanor, I don't generally think of as fragile, but I'm imagining being her in this moment, and like the itch, it's kind of like, is it an allergy? Maybe I'm allergic to vulnerability or love. And the squat thing, that's not attractive, and why am I doing it? And what are these words coming out of my mouth? Like, there's just a sense of, I'm in control of all of this, but why in the world am I picking any of these things? This is not at all in line with the sort of cool persona I feel I've set up for myself. So what is going on? And it's all embarrassing. Not telling Chidi that you love him, but everything that was said and done after, like that, she's having some sort of a big reaction here, and I guess it could fall under like the fragility umbrella. I'm seeing, so I definitely have some sort of a bias or some sort of expectations of what I think fragility looks like. But I have to, when I try to imagine being Eleanor here, like there is definitely some sort of there's something going on there because she's having not like a full-fledged meltdown, but maybe sort of a low-grade one. And how the situation for Eleanor progresses by the end of the chapter sort of complicates my feelings further on it because after some time, like she hangs out with Tahani, she goes to Jason and Janet's wedding, and then Eleanor apparently decides that she was wrong about her feelings before about loving Chidi.
An hour ago, I thought Jianyu was my soulmate. And the fact that that kinda made sense means you and I could never be meant for each other.
Eleanor sort of stands by, but also kind of rescinds her declaration of love, to Chidi. And I can't help but wonder if she's backpedaling here because expressing the feelings made her feel fragile. That's why, like, I've sort of been back and forth on whether or not I consider Eleanor to be fragile at all in this episode if I'm seeing fragility here. Overall, I think mostly she's sort of reassessing based on giving herself more time to think it through. But the idea that if she could see herself as Jason's soulmate also, then there's no way she could belong with Chidi, that I don't really see that as holding up. I mean, because people fit with all kinds of different people, and one person can be happy with a variety of different individuals. So this is sort of like she's trying to apply math instead of emotions to this scenario here, is almost what it looks like. But I do think where she lands here makes sense for her, because she knows that she loves Chidi in a way, but she also knows that she hasn't expected or required anything like romantic from him or sexual intimacy from him in order to be happy in her relationship with him. All of the sort of soulmate talk kind of makes me think of other stories where there's been sort of soulmate or meant to be or star-crossed lovers type stories. Like the ones that come to mind, Roswell from the late 90s or early aughts. Sailor Moon, I think, did that with, Serena Selena, like Usagi. I don't know what her actual first name is. I haven't watched it in a long time. But that came to mind. I feel like that's kind of what's going on with the doppelgangers, the Elena and what is his name? Not Damon. Stefan? Elena and Stefan, is that who it is? But they're doppelgangers. I feel like that was sort of supposed to be part of a meant to be or soulmate type thing at some point. Am I right on that? And then The Mummy 2, there was a lot about past lives, reincarnation. I think the bad guys are supposed to sort of be soulmates, but that doesn't really pan out by the end. She definitely just straight up ditches him as soon as things get hard. And all of it sort of has a way of reminding me of middle school style relationships, or at least the ones that I were familiar to me back when it was, it was just a group of kids who are all in the same, they were in the same friend group. And they sort of passed each other around a little bit, and it was not really romantic or sexual in any way. It was more about, like, status of having or being a girl or a boyfriend. Yeah, these are sort of what's coming to mind with what it's very, like, high stakes with no emotion is how this is sort of playing out, the way Eleanor's taking back her declaration of love. But, because so the way Eleanor dismisses her own feelings, I'm sort of feeling like I want to go the opposite direction on something. Like I'd like to revisit something I've dismissed for myself. Maybe math. I never considered myself somebody who could do math. Maybe just to do it because I was so quick to dismiss it as an option for myself, maybe I will try to learn or relearn the math that I have forgotten. I don't know, I'm opposed to these parameters that Eleanor, it feels like she's setting for herself. Even if I do understand why. It feels like she's holding herself back. And, like, it makes me want to look at where I've put those sort of parameters on myself and maybe push back on them some. Because I feel like she was showing some she was showing some sort of growth. She was taking a big step, telling Chidi she loved him. And I feel like that gets confirmed later that she had never told anybody she was in a relationship with that she loved them when she was alive. I can't decide if this retraction is her showing maturity because she did rethink it, or if she's just protecting and limiting herself. I'd really love to hear somebody else, because if she's protecting and limiting herself, then this is her being fragile, kind of. I don't know, I'd really like to hear somebody else's take on what was going on when she confessed and then took back the declaration of love.
Janet, I just realized something. I love you.
And if I contrast Eleanor's confession of love with Jason's, you know, Jason doesn't really seem fragile when he tells Janet how he feels. I mean, by expressing himself, it does make him vulnerable, which is the human word for fragile. So, I suppose he is, but I don't see him as fragile here. He comes across as sturdier than that somehow. Just this chapter, The Good Place, we have 3 confessions of love. And then the characters fall in love, sometimes to get with each other over and over because they keep getting their memories wiped. And then back on Earth, we also see familial love, like between siblings, between child and parent, which also has a way of leaving its imprint. You're quite fragile in those relationships too. I don't know if I'm trying to get a grasp on if I would say the relationship is fragile, the feelings are fragile, or the people are fragile, or any mix of the 3. But if I go even bigger and broader, the main characters, they find themselves fighting for redemption of all of the souls of humanity. They find themselves pushing back on the judge to keep her from canceling Earth and erasing humanity and starting over. And that feels like a really big, hard to call it love, but it feels like a variation of love because they're taking action. They're fighting back, they're pushing back, they're collaborating with her once they get her to change her mind. And I don't know, I was thinking about it, and they're so much sturdier when they do that. They're more like Jason telling Janet that, he loves her for the first time. They're not standing there saying, no, I love humanity, I love Earth, don't do it. They're fighting tooth and nail, and that fight, I think, has to come from love. But yeah, so telling someone you love them does make you vulnerable, and your feelings, can make you feel fragile. But the truly fragile thing is that it all goes away. Whether that person loves you back or not, you will both one day be gone, and even if you are together, if that love was reciprocated, there will be pain for at least one of you when the first one dies if you stay together. Love makes you fragile if you base your worth on that love being reciprocated. Love itself is fragile because a lack of care can destroy or diminish it. I'm sort of scattershot right now. We all need more than love, the feeling. We need love in action. And I think I'll stop there because I think that's what I was getting around to, sort of expanding on this idea of love. And Jason stands by his confession of love to Janet. There's no backpedaling. There's no acting odd, out of nerves. And his own belief in his feelings sort of gets everyone else on board, including Janet, whose love only ever seems to grow through, I think the theory was that the reboots made it stronger and stronger somehow. So the one confession I haven't talked about, the one confession of love I haven't talked about is Tahani's. And that's because Tahani tells Chidi that he loves her. It's like an anti-vulnerable, anti-fragile way of going about things. Tahani frames it as Chidi's feelings rather than her own. And she does it right after, she doesn't know this, but she does it right after Eleanor gave her confessions of love. And what it does is it sets the two of them sort of against each other in a fight for Chidi's love. But I want to acknowledge Eleanor. She sort of sees the old script popping up, 2 women fighting over a man. And she decides very deliberately to change course. And throughout, taking a different route through this interaction with Tahani than the one that was obvious, she chooses to apologize to Tahani for keeping Jianyu slash Jason's identity a secret. She asks Tahani what is something she wants to do to help her feel better, and then they do it. And she makes a real effort to bond with Tahani. And all this, it's at in a moment that would ordinarily, it would lead to the two of them ripping each other apart or tearing each other down, is I think the way Eleanor phrases it. And I'd like to acknowledge anyone who has ever similarly found themselves in one of these kinds of situations where the obvious reaction or the expected way or thing you would say in this kind of conflict, and you chose to do something else. You chose to alter the trajectory of the situation. Because those of you who have done that, I hope you know how powerful that is, and that you choose to use that power for good.
It's about two women from very different worlds who become friends, sort of like us.
So they do what Tahani wants to do, and Tahani picks this show. And I was wondering, does Tahani genuinely love this show, or did she pick this show as some sort of like a backhanded commentary toward Eleanor? And I think it can be both. I don't even necessarily think if there is any backhandedness to it, is that it's thoughtfully or willfully done on Tahani's part. I think this is something she naturally does to elevate herself over the people she's around when she can. But I think Tahani really does like the show because she identifies with the more sophisticated roommate friend person in the show. And I think she prefers casting people that she's with as the other less sophisticated lady. And again, I think that sort of points to what is fragile about Tahani, which is her self-esteem, her sense of self. She likes this show because the character she sees herself in is, in many obvious ways, meant to be the superior person. Now, what are my takeaways on Fragility? I think there are worse things than getting hurt or being wrong. Being stuck, being unable to grow, being alone when you don't want to be. I think those are a few things I would consider worse than being hurt or being wrong. I sort of get to a place where I think everyone is fragile, everything is fragile, and it all goes away in the end. But that includes the hurt and the embarrassment and the fallout of your mistakes. I also think that my mood may dictate why I think everything and everyone is fragile now. Maybe, because, I felt Jason was fairly sturdy when he was being vulnerable. So I guess I don't think everyone is fragile, but his feelings could still be hurt in that moment. So I'm like, yeah, you see, I'm just going back. I do feel like everything and everyone is fragile, and I don't know if it's my mood right now or if it's from some sort of a bias. I don't know. If you saw other examples of fragility in this chapter, or if you have other takeaways or a different perspective that you'd like to offer, please do. It would be greatly valuable to me. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.
There are way more things I hate about Chidi than like about him.